And there we go. All right, welcome everyone to the Tennessee State Museum's virtual Lunch and Learn. We are so happy to have everyone join us today. My name is Jeff Sellers, and I'm the Director of Education and Public Programs here at the State Museum. Today we are featuring our final installment of the four-part Black History Month series, The Legacy of Black Entrepreneurship in Tennessee. This has been a fantastic journey through the history and legacy of some of Tennessee's most famous Black-owned businesses. And today is a wonderful way to cap off that series. If you missed any of our programs prior to this, I do encourage you to go to our website, tnmuseum.org, and go to the video tab, where we will have all of our other former programs that we have listed there. Today's conversation focuses on the real estate industry in Memphis, and we're so happy to have our guests, Peace Realty and Universal Commercial, with us today. I will let Trenae, our host and moderator, introduce them in just a moment. But before we do that, let me introduce our moderator, Trenae Chapman. Trenae Chapman is our featured scholar for this lecture series, and she has done a fantastic job of curating our lineup here, and we have just enjoyed this program and this series so much. And a big thank you to all the hard work that Trenae and our programming staff has done in getting this set up. Trenae was born and raised here in Nashville. She earned her undergraduate degree in history and her master's in business administration from Middle Tennessee State University. And she is our curator of social history, and is just doing a fantastic job in that regard. So Trenae, welcome to the program, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to go ahead and get started and read a quick introduction for our speakers. If you do have any questions for our speakers afterwards, please drop them in the chat, and we'll have time at the end to read off some of your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The Black middle class is a loosely defined concept that has been the subject of debate since leaders like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois emerged in the years following Reconstruction. Du Bois and Washington differed in their methods regarding what would provide better socioeconomic opportunities for Black Americans and eliminate racial barriers. Du Bois believed that it would be the talented 10th, or the small population of educated Black Americans, that would guide and elevate the masses. This methodology heavily relied on the push for political rights. Washington believed that progress would be better achieved as a grassroots movement, especially including the large population of Black people of the rural South. Washington's efforts focused largely on giving this population what he saw as the most practical means of achievement, which included vocational education and training. Conflicting ideas regarding the definition and the role of the Black middle class reoccurs throughout American history. Regardless of belief systems or methodology, the overlapping argument of both thought leaders is the idea that Black Americans, no matter where they start, are owed equal opportunity for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness through hard work and the pursuit of education. Both seemingly conflicting ideas work together to bring about change for Black Americans. Samuel Peace serves as a great example of the combined ideas of Booker T. Washington's self-help philosophy and W.E.B. Du Bois's higher education and political access philosophies in action. According to census records, Samuel Peace was born in rural Mississippi to Moses and Melissa Peace in 1925. He was the youngest of 12 kids. He attended Lemoyne College and majored in philosophy and religion. He was the first African-American employee of the Tennessee Department of Employment Security and worked there for 10 years before starting his own company, Peace Realty. He served on the Rehabilitation Advisory Board and the Citizens Advisory Committee for Community Improvement of Shelby County. He also served as president of the Memphis Negro Junior Chamber of Commerce and served as pastor of Rose of Sharon Baptist Church for over 10 years. He was also a charter member and chapter president of the Memphis chapter of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, Black Realtors, also known as the Realtist. He and his wife, Maggie Lynham Peace, raised 6 children: Shirley, Samuel Jr., Moses, Sandra, Sheila, and Sharon. In July of 1967, about 6 months before the Memphis sanitation strike, the Memphis Press Scimitar published Many Negroes Climb Success Ladder, A Man Can Get Ahead in Memphis, an article written by K. Pittman Black. Pittman Black writes that Memphis has many outstanding Negro leaders and color barrier breakers who have successfully worked in a climate of good race relations, although she notes that inroads have not been made in areas such as labor unions. Pittman Black highlights a few of the leading leaders of Memphis at the time, including attorney A.W. Willis, attorney Russell Sugarman, Jesse Turner, who was the president of TriStar Bank and the local NAACP at the time, and also Samuel Peace, the founder of Peace Realty. Peace Realty of Memphis, Tennessee began in 1959 during the National Civil Rights Movement. With his wife, Maggie, as vice president, the Peace family owned and operated Peace Realty for 50 years. The company developed the first suburban enclave for Black professionals in the 1960s, Lakeview Gardens. Lakeview Gardens contained, for the first time, brand new homes for its Black middle-class residents, with Peace Realty overseeing the construction and sale of over 600 homes. Lakeview Gardens also fostered bonds and relationship among its residents and contained Lakeview Country Club, one of the first Black country clubs in the United States. The subdivision earned the National Association of Home Builders Award for the best planned subdivision of any American city the size of Memphis, Tennessee. Samuel Peace's grandson, Darrell Cobbins, continued the legacy of real estate and political involvement up until the present. He is a graduate of Rhodes College and the University of Memphis and is the founder and president of Universal Commercial, the first Black-owned commercial real estate company in Memphis. Mr. Cobbins also serves on the State Board of Education. So please welcome today Mr. Darrell Cobbins and his mother and Samuel and Maggie Peace's daughter, Shirley Peace Cobbins. Yay. If we were in person, we would have applause right now, but we're virtual.
That's fine.
But we want to thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this conversation in particular. I learned about Peace Realty through a connection that I made at the museum. So Miss Pat Shell, she's not able to join us today because she had a prior engagement, but she was telling me about her grandfather who was a realtor for Peace Realty. And I just went down a rabbit hole of research on it and found Darrell Cobbins. And I'm just so grateful that he is able to come speak with us today. Like I said, if you do have any questions, send it in the chat and we'll go through that at the end of the program, but I do have prepared a couple of questions of my own. So we spoke in the introduction about the parallel philosophies of Washington and Du Bois. Overlapping both of those philosophies is the pursuit of education. And in the article that I mentioned in the introduction, it mentions that Samuel Peace worked his way through college by going to school from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and then working 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. 7 days a week for 4 years, and he still managed to make the dean's list. So with that type of work ethic in your grandfather or your father, in what ways was that importance of education instilled in each of you during your upbringing?
Education.
With my father working so many hours and so many jobs, it left very little time during growing up years with the family, but we had the weekend as such. Uh, it instilled in me a philosophy of being a perpetual learner. Even at this age, I'm 75, I still read for information and for pleasure. So it was very important. My father had the great books in the family library. We had the children's books up under there. And growing up, I uh, I did more reading than I did playing outside with the other children. So I enjoyed it immensely. I think there's a lot to learn from education and from books. And hopefully I've instilled that in my sons.
Definitely. Yeah, education has been important in our family, going back to as you mentioned, my grandfather and grandmother. Um, and of course, with my grandfather's children, my mom and her siblings all went to different schools that were some private, some public experience, all went to college, all had the opportunity to travel abroad. And so, when I think about the education process, I think about it in terms of the books and the academics, of course, but then also how they were um, sort of introduced to culture and society in a much non-traditional way at that time for African Americans, which made them extremely well-rounded people. I think about in my grandparents' house, my grandfather had a small study, but in there was a built-in bookcase of just so many books, encyclopedias for people who remember what encyclopedias are. And as a child, I spent a lot of time in that room, just perusing, whatever my grandfather had there that he thought was important to read, and emulating him in that way. And of course, following my mom's direction on my own academic experience in school. So very, very important in our family.
I'd like to say that in growing up, my father was a very astute man where education and of his children were concerned. Often we would sit in the den and he'd sit in his lounge chair and lean back and start a conversation.
Mm.
And it was all for developing our minds to be independent thinkers. And sometimes he would play the devil advocate to get a rise, and all of us would be sitting around, no, Dad, it can't be that way. But that was just some of the ways that we were stimulated. Then my mother was a teacher, first grade over at Ford Elementary. So we had that background to not to necessarily rely on, but that was just part of our growing up experience.
One thing I would add too, since you mentioned that, from my memory as a growing up, so my grandfather was a minister. His son Sam Jr. was also a minister, but we had women ministers in the family on my grandmother's side. My grandfather had probably 4 or 5 brothers that were ministers. So I remember my uncle Sam and my grandfather having these biblical debates, and the way that people argue about the Dallas Cowboys versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, my grandfather and uncle, I mean, were going at it over passages in the Bible. And I mean, literally, my uncle stormed out the room over this point that he was trying to make about Melchizedek. That's what I remember. And so that was informative for me that they could be that passionate about um, religion. And so it's emblazoned in my mind how seriously they were taking their theologian status in addition to being educated men and businessmen.
Mhm. I love that. And also underlying Samuel Peace's story is the idea of hard work. So
Mm.
he is listed in the census records as being born to parents who were general farmers in rural Mississippi. So without a doubt, his success is attributed to his own hard work. So in what ways was the importance of hard work instilled in you while you were growing up?
Well, we were always taught to be a contributor to different organizations and different things. Uh, you would see us during the spring cleaning with a toothbrush and soap, scrubbing the baseboard between the floor and the wall. That's how clean my mother wanted our house to be. So we did that, and the back door to the screen, and the painting, and the washing of the windows. So we didn't think anything about it other than this is what has to be done. So we didn't feel like we were being put upon or anything, but just training as to how to keep a home.
I would add, so my grandfather would essentially allow my brother and I to be in his office with him, which was directly across the street from the house in Lakeview Gardens. And we spent countless hours. He'd let us answer the phone. He'd take us to the bank to make bank deposits with him. He'd take us out to homes to do measurements and collect rent for folks that he was collecting rent for. And then within his office, he managed his agents, so we were around the agents. And this is at 4, 5, 6 years old. And I just see my grandfather as, almost like a father, because my father wasn't around for the first 15 years of my life. So this is the man that taught me how to ride a bike in the parking lot of the business. But my hard work example is him, because I saw him in action in his office, at home, in the community, serving his clients. And there was one thing that I'm proud of to say about him is how much he helped people. So people who had been turned down for homes, who didn't qualify for homes, they would come to him and see what he can do. And I just remember him at his typewriter, if you remember typewriters, typing out letters to mortgage companies to help people get qualified, and just going above and beyond what is traditional to help people achieve home ownership that some folks had given up on. And so that's the same thing I try to emulate in my business with people who I work with and try to help. And that, example of hard work is just emblazoned in my mind from seeing him do it every day.
I'll tell you one thing that I remember that Darrell probably does not remember is that my father was a 24/7 real estate man. He would go down to the bus station where the people from West Memphis lived to come over to Memphis to look at a house. That often would entail arriving there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, picking them up, scooping them up, taking them to the house with a flashlight and showing them everything that was going to be done to that house and how it was going to be perfect. And then he'd take them back to the bus stop because they had to be at work at 7. And so the people would get back on the bus and go back over to West Memphis. And the next time they came over there, they were doing a contract for the house. But he had a very vivid way of depicting the beauty of the home, the functionality of the home, and of the neighborhood that they were moving into. So he was there.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up your grandfather and father as a member of the community, because when I was learning about Peace Realty, Miss Patricia Shells shared with me that her grandfather, who was a realtor for Peace Realty, would sometimes put down money for the deposit for the homes and would do anything to get people homes in Memphis at the time. And that was just one of many jobs that he had. He was very active in the community, in the church as well. So it seems like that was a theme in that organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how has your family history shaped how you show up as a business and a community leader, with that being in the back of our heads?
For me, I was talking to a group yesterday, an employee group at a corporation here in town, and just talking about how instrumental my grandfather was in who I am as a human being, let alone a businessman. And some of the points that I made was that he was a servant, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
He had a servant's heart. He approached everything with a servant's heart. One of the things, as my mom was just talking, I was thinking about from my memory is he would receive phone calls at home from people, up until 10 o'clock at night. And we lived with them for a portion of my upbringing. And I remember answering the phone and people asking for Mr. Peace all the time. And so he was that kind of servant where he was available to you morning, noon, and night. He was also a mentor to a lot of real estate people who went on to have great careers and start their own companies, which I think my mom will share something about. But I try to do the same in helping particularly women and people of color enter into the commercial real estate industry that have not been had the opportunity at other places, and being that pathway into the industry for a lot of people, I consider to be, a blessing. And, I attribute all of that to the values that my grandfather instilled in me.
Mm. We were just talking about the number of companies that were spun off of Peace Realty Company, and I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At least 7 salespeople left Peace Realty Company and started their own business. There was no competition as well as much as there was collaboration between them. And another thing is that he had just as many ministers to come out of that office as he did real estate brokers to have their own company. So it was a very good atmosphere, a very positive atmosphere, and everybody was working on the team for the same goals and directions.
Name some of the companies that spun off.
Some of the companies are Lawrence Johnson, Alvin Bowser, Harold Moore, Lewis Harris, Fred Howell, George Wilson, and York Jones. Those were just a few of them. Now, don't ask me which one of them became ministers, but we had that church atmosphere in there, and we were going to serve the public. And just as Darrell has discussed, brought up servant leadership, that was my thought when I put them in different schools. The schools that I put them in, they were Christian based. And I knew that when they came out of there, they were going to have a conscience, they were going to have values, and they were going to want to participate in the community to help all of us do better. So I had the servant leadership at Bertram, and they had the same thing at the schools that they attended.
Great. So, kind of going off of that, is there any advice that you received from your father and grandfather that really sticks with you and keeps you moving forward today?
Well, I would say my mother and my father, because both of them were very instrumental in my growing up. And the thing that I remember mostly is the little verse that we learned when I was in the 4th grade over at Ford Road School. If a task is once begun, never leave it till it's done. Be the task great or small, do it well, or not at all. So I carry that with me from my parents and from school.
I love that.
I would share that my grandfather told me when I was very young, probably 9, maybe 10 years old. He said, "Grandson, make sure that you always watch the news. Make sure that you always read the newspaper and stay up on current events, because any environment that you go into, you will be able to talk to anybody about the issues of the day, and trade opinions, find commonality, and that will set you apart from the average person." And so to this day, probably probably too much, I'm a news junkie, I'm a documentary junkie, I'm a current affairs and events junkie, but all of that over the course of now 40 some odd years um, has given me sort of a historical database in my mind on Memphis and things that have happened in Memphis and people, places, events. So now at 50 years old, I consider myself kind of a wise old sage now on the happenings and history of all things Memphis. But a lot of that comes into play, in civic leadership and in areas that I've been involved in, from politics to the arts to other opportunities of public service where that wisdom that I've been blessed to acquire based on my grandfather's guidance is brought to bear in all of these circles that I'm able to be present in. And so all of that stems from that little piece of guidance that he gave me when I was 10 years old.
Mm. Now, I traveled along with mom and dad everywhere. If they went to seminar on business, I was there. If they, such as the National Business League, they had a chapter here in the city, and Leonard Small was the director, executive director, and it was small business management that was put on by the Small Business Administration. So I got that workshop early on, before I was 20 years old. I was getting that type of exposure, and I got my salesman license with
1972.
1972,
6 months before she gave birth to me, she got licensed in real estate.
and then 2 years later, I got my broker's license. So I guess I was about 24 or 25 when I did that.
Well,
And
the important distinction to make about that, getting licensed as a real estate agent is one thing. Becoming a broker slash principal broker is another thing. And so being a principal broker allows you to have your own firm, essentially, and have agents under you. So in 1974, 75,
mm,
for my mom to achieve that as a young Black woman in Tennessee was, I'm still blown away by it every time that I think about it. And I know a lot of that had to do with the mentoring and guidance of my granddad.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I have a question here about that. So during my research, I learned that real estate has a different type of history of systemic discrimination compared to public accommodations. When you think of the civil rights movement, you usually thinking about integration of like schools and businesses, but in real estate, the history is a little bit different. And we also spoke with Cheryl McKissick Daniel last week of McKissick and McKissick, and she shared with us some of the current statistics of Black architects and contractors as well. So can you speak to the history of the real estate profession for Black realtors and also its current state today?
Sure. My experience on the residential side is limited because I've mainly done commercial for the past 22 years. But growing up, of course, for the first third of my life, with my grandfather and around his business and seeing him operate, I would say, I think, first of all, that's why the discrimination aspect of it is why an organization like NAREB was created nationally to provide a voice for black folks in real estate, because realtors is a different term. They call themselves realtists because they couldn't be a part of the National Association of Realtors. They created their own association, and these chapters spread throughout the country, and they still exist today. Actually, we both have to go speak Monday evening to the Memphis NAREB chapter that my grandfather helped start. Monday evening about him and his legacy. And so, with the history of redlining and all of those challenges that we know existed in communities for decades that segregated people from one neighborhood to another, um, I think we have to acknowledge the fortitude that African American real estate agents had to be able to navigate successfully that terrain, in addition to mortgage companies that were challenging. And I remember my grandparents telling me back during their heyday that Universal Life Insurance Company, which was featured in the article that you mentioned, was sort of the big, huge behemoth insurance organization for African Americans, um, maybe one of the largest in the Southeast, I'm sure. But they were the only place that Black people could go to get mortgages. And that in and of itself just underscores for you how artfully Black real estate agents had to navigate because the challenges were tremendous. I'll dovetail to the commercial industry where I started in 2001 in this business. And at the time, I was the only person of color, period, at any major commercial real estate firm in the city. And that was the case for probably the first 5 or 6 years of my career. And so now, we may have 10, 22 years later, progress, but very slow progress. But that's why I think it's necessary for folks like me and others to step out and create our own entities where we can change that on our own rather than, expecting it to come from elsewhere. So those kind of challenges, we just know we have to deal with. And part of my commitment and fortitude comes from knowing how my grandfather and agents during that time had to wrestle with the issues of their day to serve their clients and achieve their clients' outcome. And that's the same focus that I have today. And that's the same focus that I share with the agents that work with me.
Right, great. I have a couple more questions before I throw it to the audience. I did want to double back on something that Mrs. Cobbins said earlier. So you did mention also your mom, who I didn't get to mention in my introduction since it's featured around Peace Realty. But during my research, I learned that she was also very involved in the community and also the Tennessee Arts Commission as well, correct?
That's correct. She was appointed by Governor Winfield Dunn to the Tennessee
Mhm.
Arts Commission. She felt it was quite an honor. She didn't know whether or not it was a just name only, or a viable organization. She found out after she attended a board meeting with all of the 13 or 14 board members there that this could really be helpful to the not necessarily just the Black community, but to the community in general in Memphis. Um, she served on there, I think it was 4 years. I think it was a 4 year term that she did there.
She was appointed in 1974, right?
Uh-huh,
Mhm.
uh-huh. She said these are big steps forward in helping children grow up not thinking that the arts are stuffy. Uh, Another quote that she made was, I personally believe that a lively arts program that encourages total community participation would be the greatest asset a city could have, and we could put stop to all of our great talent going to waste. She also received an award by the AKA's Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority here in the city. They inducted her into their Hall of Fame for the work that she did there while she was on the Tennessee Arts Commission. And that's where, uh, like that, I would work with the Tennessee Arts Commission, the Community Arts Panel. Uh, I did that for 6 years. That was a voluntary position. But the way I looked at it was that, like my mother, I didn't want art to be necessarily stuffy, anything like that, but it had their advantages to being involved in art in one fashion or another. So I was a docent at the Brooks Art Gallery, and then I became a member of the Brooks League. My sister Sandra was one of the first administrative managers that they hired at the Brooks back in the 1970s, and she was the assistant curator of education.
Wow.
So we have all been involved in the arts in one form or fashion. I say the easiest way to have art in the home is to go to the Goodwill shop, uh, get you a frame with the glass in it, pay $1, $2, go get you some construction paper and get your picture and put your picture, stylize your picture on the construction page, then stick it in the frame, and then you have a piece of art in your home. So that's, it doesn't have to cost $1 million to be artistic or artsy. and we have the performing arts as well. And it's important for us to be well-rounded individuals. And the more well-rounded we are, the more we can not necessarily compete in society, but we can enjoy all of the nuances that the art world and performing art world offers.
I would just add that my grandmother, we called her Big Mama. Big Mama helped Jackie Nichols start Playhouse on the Square here in Memphis when she was on the Tennessee Arts Commission. And when she passed, he was quoted, in the paper and was talking about her and how instrumental she was in helping him launch that what is now an institution in Memphis in the arts world. Um, and that's the type person that she was, and of course those values have been passed down to us.
Yes, a very well-rounded family.
Mhm.
And also very, during my research, I found out involved in opera as well,
Uh-huh.
opera
Mm.
houses.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
Sam,
Let
Sam,
me say this first.
okay.
The reason I'm laughing is because all of my life, all I ever heard about was when the entire family performed in this production of Porgy and Bess.
That's what I was going to
And
mention.
I was too young to remember it because I wasn't there. But
One more.
all of my life, for years and years and years and years, they always reference this Porgy and Bess production
Mm-hmm.
that both my grandparents and all of their children had roles and were in that production. So you can talk about the operatic.
It was very good. It was exciting, and it was the one time that all the family could participate on the same level in a art production. Now I was the only one who was not in that production, and that's because I was pregnant with my first child, so I didn't have the wherewithal to be in the play. But I was a big supporter, and that was the first time that Porgy and Bess had come to Memphis. Now I believe several years ago, 2, 3 years ago, uh, that Opera Memphis brought Porgy and Bess back to Memphis. But I'm quite sure they have a new cast and new uh, new scenery and different things like that. But it's something to relate to. And there was a family out of Mississippi that came and participated in a black family, and it was a good time. It was fun. It was enjoyable, and it was memorable.
And I'll mention too, Sam Jr. was a operatic performer. He went to Shenandoah Music Conservatory and spent years in New York living and singing. Performed at the Met on a number of occasions. When he moved back to Memphis, my brother and I, we got really close with him. And if you can imagine being driven to basketball practice with Pavarotti singing next to you with all of its volume and and force, at any given moment in time when he was around, you would hear, him belt out some operatic tune that he was fond of. And so those kind of memories are really, indelible. And you're talking to me and my mom, but of course she had 5 brothers and sisters, 3 of whom aren't with us anymore, but all talented actors. My aunt Sheila was Miss Teen Memphis in the mid 70s, and she went on to compete in Miss Teen America and came in first runner up to Paula Zahn, who we all know from CBS Morning News, and she's a national broadcaster now. But their parents exposed them to the arts and culture, and they took it and ran with it, all in their own right.
All right, that is great. I just have a couple more questions. My next
Okay.
question is, what are the family values that were taught to you at a young age that you continue to instill into the next generation?
Well, we talked a little bit about some of them. Hard work, and I always, hard work is relative, I think, for a lot of folks because we all don't start out in the same place, but we can all put in maximum effort, maximum commitment, maximum energy. But definitely that as a principle in terms of getting from where you are to where you want to be. One thing that I've always done my entire life is I had a football coach when I was 11 named Steve Childress, and he would pick us up for games on Sundays and take us to the school early before the games. And I remember one Sunday before a game, he told me he wanted me to go up to the bleachers, sit down, and think about what I needed to do that day out on the football field. And so I went up there for about 20 or 30 minutes and just envisioned myself in the game and performing and succeeding and doing everything I needed to do. And then lo and behold, I would actually go out on the field and do it. And so in my life, I've always imagined myself in the next phase, whatever that next phase is. When I was in elementary, I would imagine myself in junior high. When I was in junior high, I would imagine myself in high school. When I was in high school, I would imagine myself in college. When I was in college, I would imagine myself being a professional out in the business world. And so when I talk to young people, I give them that as an example because probably 5 or 10 years ago, I was reading an article about Tiger Woods, Serena Williams, these superlative athletes. And one of the things they talked about is how they envision themselves in the match or in the game. And then they actually go out there and do it. And so, of course, I'm thinking Coach Childress told me to do that when I was 10 years old. And so that's the advice that, one piece of advice that I try to give young people is forecast where you want to be, break it down into phases, and you'll have mentors and you'll have supporters along the way to help you get where you want to be.
Well, what I think about and what I would tell any young individual is to go back to literature and look up the poem If you can hold your head up when all about your looseness and blaming it on you, and so forth and so on, that you would be a man or a woman at that point. But it's a growth period. There's peer pressure all around, and you just have to have your own head as to what is good for you and what your parents say is good for you that you're going to follow and proceed in life. Uh, there's another, I'm going again, there's another song, if I can help somebody as they travel along, then my living has not been in vain. And so I think if we keep those two things in mind, younger people and some older people, we're not too old to change, uh, that we would have a much more prosperous, not necessarily monetarily, but to have a more prosperous life and lifestyle.
That's great. Okay. And then this question is for Mr. Cobbins. How has your leadership role differed from your grandfather's, and how has it remained the same?
Hmm. Um, I guess it's differed in the sense that I've operated in sort of the commercial corporate government leadership realm, and he was much more grassroots oriented. Not that I'm not grassroots, but I think that's a differentiator professionally, being in commercial real estate and being in economic development. I worked at the chamber for 3 years before I got into real estate. But in terms of how things are the same, uh, again, I find myself when I look back being very aligned with his path and his journey, where he blazed a trail with Peace Realty in Lakeview Gardens, doing something in 1959 into the 60s and forward that not many African Americans were doing. Similarly, I have to remind myself sometime that when I stepped out in 2007, I was starting a commercial real estate services firm as a young African American, and that had not been done before in this community. And so, I treasure every day that I'm able to look back on my grandfather's life, his legacy, as a father, as a husband, as a citizen, as a businessman. And I'm proud to look at similarities and similar paths, and just being a branch of his legacy that continues to try to make a difference in this community, and particularly make a difference in the lives of African Americans in Memphis, which make up 67% of the population. I don't have to mention, the different challenges that we have as a community, but I've always tried to be a good citizen and play whatever role I could in making a difference in those areas.
That is great. That's all the questions that I have. If you have any questions, Jeff, if you could read off any questions in the chat. And we also have some folks in our learning room here at the museum. So if you guys have questions as well, we could get
I want
those
to make sure I
answered.
showed you, it's a picture of my granddad. Can you see it?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that hung in his house. There it is. It hung in his house for all of my life. Um, and it was in this particular hallway that you had to pass through to get through the house. But I looked at that picture, I probably looked at that picture literally 1 million times. And now it hangs in my office when you first walk in the door, in dedication to him.
That's awesome. I also have a lot of great photos that I found in my research in the newspaper that I'll send. I'm sure you have them already, but a very well photographed man.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, while we're waiting, if anyone has any questions, just type them in the chat box and we'll get to them. We have about 10 minutes left of our time here. I guess I'll take the advantage of having the first dibs on the question. I just want to say how inspirational these conversations are, and this one in particular. It has been wonderful to see these these multi-generational family-owned businesses. I mean, it's hard enough to have, I know it's hard enough to have a business and keep it afloat, but these family-owned businesses, all of them have navigated the waters of not just business, but discrimination throughout those generations, and have overcome so many obstacles along the way. And it's just a remarkable thing. And the one theme throughout is a strong family unit. I'm getting, my question is, what kind of obstacles has the Peace Realty overcome? Not just market. I know the real estate market can go up and down and up and down, but what kind of obstacles have you guys overcome to keep it within the family? Has it ever been able, or has anyone ever wanted to buy you out, or have you ever had to just overcome those obstacles? And then my final two-part question is, what does the future of it look? Is there a new generation coming along with Peace Realty to keep that legacy going?
So on the residential side, Peace Realty sort of went by the wayside when my grandfather died in 2009. And so really, the legacy continues on through Universal Commercial. And I would say challenges, first and foremost, as I mentioned, being in this industry that has traditionally been non-diverse, and charting a path and a course to be astute, accomplished, and that be acknowledged by the marketplace is a constant pursuit that has to be, you just have to be vigilant on. Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League, I heard him speak once, and he said, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind, and then you're out of influence. And so we try to make sure that we sound the bullhorn when we accomplish things for our clients, when we accomplish things civically and in the community, so that it can be seen and known that there is a contribution being made, and that this company and folks that look like us have a place and space in this industry. Other challenge, I would say, 2008 financial meltdown. Well, let's backtrack. I began my career in 2001, 6 months before, or not even 6 months, 4 months before 9/11. So my wife now, girlfriend then, I remember about 6 months in, she was like, "Are you sure this is what you want to do for a living?" Because things had slowed down dramatically with the economy. And I told her, let's just get to the other side of this, and things will start clicking, which they did. But fast forward to 2007 when I launched my firm, a year before the '08 meltdown. So again, we had to weather that storm. And again, during the pandemic, by that time, I feel like, hey, I've been through two prior calamities. All we can do is control what we can control, and that's do the work and focus on the work and let this circumstance that we can't control play itself out and keep on keeping on. And so, I'm happy to sit here approaching now 16 years as an entrepreneur and 22 years in this industry, and being an example that we can do this, and we can do it with longevity, and we can do it with success. And there's a saying in the church community, you can't know my glory if you don't know my story. And the challenges that you overcome are a big part of the story, because anybody can run and ride on a smooth road, but when you got some twists and turns and hills and obstacles in your way, and you still make it to your destination, that's something to be proud of.
And that seems like a theme throughout our other speakers as well. It's like there's never going to be a right time. There's always going to be something, even if it's not right now. You never know what's coming, in the future. You just have to be, you have to stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Determination. Don't give up.
Perseverance.
Perseverance.
All right. If we don't have any other questions, I know I could think of one. I have plenty at the top of my head.
Okay.
Mhm.
Mrs. Cobbins, do you have any stories that you like to share from your time in real estate? Any favorite stories that stick out?
Let me see. Well, let's see. I was pregnant when I got my license, and I worked over there, and everybody called Dad Chief. Chief. So what about it, Chief? And he prided himself on being the chief of whatever it was. But he gave me a lot of latitude as far as growth and development was concerned, and doing whatever it was that was necessary to be done. At the time that I was in real estate, uh, you kind well, now they pre-qualify you before they take you to see houses. Uh, but back then you were flying blind. You just know that they said they made 10,000 a year. You didn't know how many bills they had and what type of percentage that was going to make them have to qualify or non-qualify. One of the things that happen from time to time is an individual or a family would get qualified and approved for the house. Being before the time of the closing, they go out and buy a whole new house of furniture, come back to the table, and they're told that they can't have the mortgage because they're over the percentage that you can have for bills. And that's kind of astonishing, but we had to tell them, wait day after, 2 days after. And get that house that you want. But people came to us with dreams. They each had a dream, and it was for us to help them to realize the dream that they had for it to come into fruition. Over the years, Peace Realty Company was so well known that we were getting third generation uh, clients. You know, the mama, the child, the grandchild, they would all come. Mr. Peace, I have to get that. Go to Mr. Peace. So he was well known in the community, he and my mother and our family as such. And I think it's a testament to him uh, that he was able to make that many people happy and make those many dreams come true, that they would continuously send others to him for the same type of service.
And we do have a question in our smart learning room. Austin, if you could unmute.
All right, you're good to go.
Hi, I have enjoyed your presentation. Just wanted to know, do you have someone in your family, do you have children that will continue the business?
Well, I have a soon-to-be 14-year-old son. He hasn't said he's interested in real estate, but at 14, I didn't know I wanted to do real estate. But we'll see. We have some young cousins and nephews and other relatives who have expressed an interest. But it's interesting, as my mom was talking, and this touches on your question. My grandfather had 6 children, and he never forced any of them to go into real estate. He allowed for them to explore the world, you know, develop your own goals, aspirations, and pursuits. And I was always like, why did granddaddy not make them do that? And when I look back on each of the each child's life and what they accomplished and what they achieved and what they pursued, real estate probably wasn't for them. And you see examples where it works out great in some instances, and you see examples where it's a nightmare in others. And so I think my granddad was wise enough to say, let my children pursue their goals and not force them into something that they may or may not want to do. And then we have both a business and a family friction that could probably be avoided. And so, with that, with my son, my cousins and nephew and niece, I want to expose them to the industry, but I want them, by that exposure, to develop some passion that makes them decide whether it's for them or not. And Uncle Darrell will be here to support them regardless. But one thing I wanted to talk about briefly that occurred to me as I was thinking about this conversation was, so my first thought about commercial real estate came when I was working at the Chamber of Commerce in the late 90s. I was doing membership sales for the Chamber. So I was seeing, all these economic development deals and activities, and I would read the Memphis Business Journal, and every other article was about some commercial real estate deal. And this was during the dot-com boom when everything was, exploding economically across the country. And so I looked at it and said, well, commercial real estate seems to be a direct beneficiary of this economy. I come from a real estate family. Let me look at commercial real estate. And so I recalled a conversation that I had with a gentleman by the name of Frank Banks, who started Tennessee's first Black CPA firm, Banks, Finley and White, that still exists to this day. And I was talking to Mr. Banks, and he was telling me about how he realized he wanted to become a CPA was because he grew up directly across the street from Jesse Turner Sr., who was Tennessee's first CPA, first Black CPA. And so he saw Mr. Mr. Turner coming home every day with his briefcase, and he just knew he wanted to be like Mr. Turner. And so he becomes a CPA. My grandfather is one of his first clients, which he told me. And he goes on to create Tennessee's first Black CPA firm that's been around now for probably 50 years, maybe around 50 years. And so that prompted me to think, if I go into commercial real estate, maybe I can be to some young person what Jesse Turner was to Frank Banks. And when I think about my grandfather and his legacy and everything that I learned being with him in work and in life, I don't think, after working for 7 years for Cushman and Wakefield as a broker, I don't think I would have had the courage to step out and start my own company if I had not had in my life experience having seen my grandfather run his own company and knowing that it's possible. And so I'm a member of an organization called the 100 Black Men of Memphis, which is affiliated with the 100 Black Men of America. And our national motto is, what they see is what they'll be. And so to the extent that through my work and through my service, if I can be an example to a young person to either be in real estate, be a business person, pursue their goals, all of that, I consider a continuation of the legacy of my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother and her siblings, and all that they poured into my brother and I. And I want to acknowledge my brother too. He passed away 2.5 years ago during the pandemic from the coronavirus. But he actually went into real estate before I did. And he worked with my grandfather for a while. He worked for another company called Benchmark Realtors. And then at one point, he came and worked with me for about 3 or 4 years and helped me push Universal along. So in all of these conversations, I always have to acknowledge my big brother, who was instrumental in, he was the extrovert, I was the introvert, but he taught me a lot, and just want to acknowledge him and his role in all of this.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're out of time. I wish we had more time to talk. But I do want to thank both of you guys for joining us for this last installment and wrapping up our Legacy of Black Entrepreneurship series. And thank you to everyone who has supported throughout the entire series and come to watch and listen to these amazing stories. Jeff, do you have anything else that you want to say to wrap up?
No, I just want to once again thank you, Trinae, for facilitating this wonderful legacy series that we have today. And I want to thank each one of our guests for making the time. It has truly added so much to the Tennessee story and Black History Month. And for those, again, please visit our website, tnmuseum.org. And when you have time, just watch those videos. This has been wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Thank you again, Trinae.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. You guys have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.